A couple of months ago, I came across this 1997 Mercedes C280, and while it wasn't what I was looking for, I've got a soft spot for these older Mercedes, especially with the inline six. The car was a one-owner Florida car, however, it had been somewhat neglected over the past few years. It had faded trim, nicks and scrapes and scratches. The plastics on the inside were brittle from the Florida heat. It had a few leaks and minor other issues, but overall it ran and drove. As you can see, the underside is very clean, no rust at all whatsoever. And due to this fact, and that it only had 77,000 miles on it, I figured it was well worth the time and effort to show it some love and put it back together. So I started ordering some parts and began work on the car, and this is the first video in a series of bringing back Betty. Let's just take a quick look underneath and see what we got. Okay. Starter side is clean. Yep, it's the connector. Definitely. Just like all of them, the connector's leaking. Add that to the list. So first things first, let's go ahead and swap out the transmission connector plug. It's quite simple of a job. There's many videos out there that show you how to do it. The only thing I will stress on is make sure when you install the new one, you do not just jam it in there. Make sure you don't bend any of the pins on the conductor plate. Well, with my luck, it turned out to be a little bit more difficult than it should have been. The ring that goes around the plug snapped right off, making it just a tiny bit more difficult for me to do the job. But I got it eventually. When the fluid stops leaking, make sure to give it a good blow to ensure there's no fluid left in the connector plug. And make sure not to force the new connector in. Be gentle. Now that installing the plug is almost done, let's move on to some of the cosmetics, starting with the grill. So there's a series of 8mm bolts all the way around that hold it in. And then there's these clips here. The bigger ones are on the top, smaller ones on the side. You just slide them out gently. And one screw at the bottom right here. This guy. And the old grill right here that was damaged came right out. Now it should be as simple as sliding that into the frame, putting the clips back on, and the one screw, and reinstalling it on the car. See how it goes. I went with the newer style grill, thinking since it was black and chrome, it would give the car a nice touch. One important tip while installing the new grille is not to force it underneath those metal tabs. You don't want to break anything. You just got to wiggle it in, move it around, and eventually it'll pop right in. Before I reinstall the grille, I have a new Mercedes emblem and some clear side markers to go in as well. The old emblem was broken, which made it a little bit more difficult to get the base of it out. However, with a little bit of finesse and a little bit of penetrating oil, it came right out and the new one went right in. As far as the side markers go, I bought this brand in the past and had no problem. These required a lot of little modifications on the connecting tabs to get them to fit properly. As you can see here, I got the door trim out. You can see where it's faded from the sun. Now these are obsolete and they're hard to find, but I did find a driver's door. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to experiment with this one. I think that chrome trim can slide right out. I don't want to break these little clips here, but I tried, and if you can see here, I pried it out just a little bit and started tapping on the other end, and it's coming out. It's real easy to remove this though. There's that one screw there right inside the door, and then it just slides towards the rear of the car and pops out. So I'm gonna keep tapping gently. You can see I just did a couple of taps and I already got a bit of a gap there. If I can slide this out somehow, that way I can just refinish this trim without having to hunt for another one. But in the case that it doesn't work, I'll replace the drivers, and then the other ones I'll just have to tape off the chrome piece and paint them. Okay. So let's place it there, using the bottom drawer to hold it. And we're just going to gently, we're going to give it a few taps and see if this works or not. So let's see. Nice and easy. Bingo! All right. Wow. I didn't break something for once. Usually with these big meat cleavers of mine, everything I touch breaks. So now let's go ahead and remove the chrome trim from the remaining pieces. Gotta clean these up, and then we can, since this was the smallest, we'll go get the paint, match it for this, so I can refinish these, reinstall the trim, and put them back on the car. First thing I did was I cleaned them off, then I sanded them down, wiped them down again, hit them with a coat of primer, and then after a couple coats of primer dried, went ahead and sprayed them with the paint that I matched the best I could to the factory color.
Literally like half a shade off, maybe.
I continued to work on the car that evening while the camera wasn't rolling. I went to replace the headlight switch, and while removing the dash panel under the steering column, it got caught on the emergency brake release and completely shattered into a million pieces. I went ahead and said, forget it, you know what, let me just take it for a ride, after topping off the transmission fluid to make sure everything was okay, and lo and behold, the transmission would not shift out of second gear, meaning the car was in limp mode and I'd have to hook it up to the scanner to see what was going on. I went to the shop the next day, grabbed the scanner, and guess what? We were missing the adapter for this car. I went ahead and ordered the adapter, which would take a week to get in. By this time, I figured I was just going to leave Betty alone and come back to it later. So until then, thank you so much for watching. See you next time.